get off well.
Greetings, viewers. Natalia here, bringing you another review. When I reviewed Who Censored Roger Rabbit, I said there was another book that I wanted to review called Silverwing by Kenneth Opel. However, I wasn't able to find my copy of the book until last November. I originally came across this title back in maybe late middle school or early high school, and read through it in about maybe 2 weeks. Having taken such a liking to the story, I purchased a copy of the book myself, as well as the 2 sequel books, Sunwing and Firewing. The subtitle of this book is How One Small Bat Became a Noble Hero. There normally aren't too many books about talking animals, where the main focus character is a bat. The only other one I can think of would be Stella. Now, normally if you were to think of bats in literature, your mind would most likely go to Bram Stoker's Dracula, even though the only connection bats and vampires had back then was that bats are nighttime flyers, and vampires are said to come out at night to feed on the living. This was back before people actually bothered to study things they didn't understand, so for a long time bats were seen as fiendish little bloodsuckers, rather than the shy creatures they actually are. I suppose the point I'm driving at here is Stella and Silverwing are the only 2 books I've read that doesn't portray bats as blind little gremlins, and actually seems to understand them. Our story begins with protagonist Shade Silverwing hunting for moths and encountering his fellow pups. Yes, I said pups, that's what young bats are called, look it up. Shade is the runt of his colony and often made fun of by the other young bats like his apparent rival Chinook. Rather than return to their roost in Tree Haven with the other young bats, Shade decides to stay out and see the sunrise, which causes the other young bats to call him crazy. Bats aren't supposed to see the sunrise since it's a law that's always existed, but bats also believe that they'll go blind or be reduced to dust if they're caught in the sun's light. But Shade, wanted to one-up Chinook and believing that his own father saw the sun once, ignores these warnings and takes what he assumes is a proper hiding spot in the tree's canopy, only to be spotted and attacked by an owl. It's only through the timely arrival of his mother Ariel, who'd been told what Shade was doing, that the young bat manages to escape with his life. However, the colony is very upset with Shade, since the owls will doubtlessly be angry and come the following night, and all the colony's elders, except for their chief Frida, is in favor of sacrificing the child to appease the giant birds. So why are the bats forbidden to see the sun, I hear you ask? In years gone by, there was a great war between the beasts that walk on the earth and the birds that fly in the sky. The bats refused to take any part in it, and were branded as cowards because they didn't take a side when the whole thing was over. This is actually based on an old folktale that also results in bats being banished to the night sky. However, in that folktale, the bats were banished because they tried to play both sides of the war and got caught, whereas the bats in Silverwing simply saw no point of the war to begin with. When Frida shares the story with Shade, she adds on that the deity of all northern bats, Nocturna, made a promise that bats would one day fly in the daylight again. She also reveals that a long time ago she was caught by humans, who put a metal band on her wing, and this led her to believe that humans would somehow have a part to play in Nocturna's promise. When night arrives, the owls do indeed come, their presumed leader demanding Shade. And when Frida refuses to give Shade up, the owls burn down their roost. How owls are able to manage and maintain fire, I don't know. But this is a serious blow to the Silverwing colony, since winter will soon be arriving. This causes the entire colony to start on their migration earlier than intended, and reach their second roost, Hibernaculum, before the winter months arrive. Before making the trip, Ariel shares what's called a sound map with Shade, so he'll be able to keep up with the rest of his colony using echolocation. Unfortunately, Shade is separated from his colony, and his family is caught in a storm. Separation aside, Shade has managed to survive the storm, and finds himself in a boat, drifting out to a small island, where he meets the only inhabitant, a female eastern red bat named Marina. Like Shade, Marina's without her colony, though she doesn't seem to mind too much. When Shade notices that Marina has a metal band on her arm, he tells her about Frida, and hearing that there's another bat with a band given to her by humans is all the motivation Marina needs to leave her island and join Shade on his quest to meet up with his colony again. See, Marina isn't really on her own by choice. We find out that when she was banded by humans, she was banished from her own colony, since they believed the ban would bring bad luck upon them, a sentiment shared by another traveling colony of bats who noticed Marina. When the two little bats are passing through a city, they're caught by a flock of pigeons, who claim that 2 of their numbers were killed by a pair of bats. And Shay and Marina try to deny that they know anything about this attack, however. The pigeon in charge goes full-on racist, asserting that because they are bats, Shade and Marina must certainly know who was behind the attack. Things go from bad to worse when Owl arrives and not only recognizes Shade, but concludes that the attack was in retaliation for Tree Haven being burned down, and declares that bats are no longer safe from being attacked in the night skies. Shade and Marina manage to escape the birds and hide out in a cathedral where they meet an old blind bat named Zephyr. They're safe here because, according to Zephyr, birds are too afraid of the cathedral's gargoyles to venture further in. Although he no longer has the use of his eyes, Zephyr is still able to see via his echolocation and informs Shade that his colony passed through a few nights ago, confirming to Shade that he was indeed on the right track following his sound map since Marina joined him. Turns out a pair of bats did kill those pigeons, but they weren't northern bats. It was a pair of spectral bats from the jungle named Goth and Throb, who escaped from a lab where they were being studied. But why did they kill the pigeons, I hear you ask? Spectral bats, or Vampirum spectrum as the sequel book calls the species going forward, are carnivorous. Spectral bats are also called false vampire bats, and the summary on the back of the book even calls Goth a vampire bat. I find this a little hilarious, since how could you confuse this for this? Goth and Throb are unused to the colder climate and unable to read the northern stars, so when Goth sees a pair of northern bats being attacked by an owl, he swoops in to the rescue with ulterior motives. And it turns out the pair that he rescues are Shade and Marina. Goth is charismatic enough to get Shade on his side, but Marina doesn't trust Goth, which is actually a good call on her part, since not only will spectral bats eat birds, they eat other bats too. And here's where my little recap ends. I think one of the things that Will does best with his writing is how in detail he goes into. Whether it's a character's environment or appearance, he is a master of painting a picture with words. When he describes how bats are able to hunt insects with echolocation, I was able to see in my mind exactly how that might look, and I'd have to say that the cartoon adaptation of the book did it justice. He also makes the echo chamber of Tree Haven sound like a mystical place, a location untouched by the outside world, and store ancient history. Even something as mundane as the physical descriptions of animals receive a bit of detail. I feel the main theme of the book is belief. Frida believes that one day bats will be free to fly in the daylight, and that humans will somehow have a part to play in that. This is a belief she shares with Shade after sharing with him the story of how bats became outcasts. Bats believe if they're caught in the sunlight, they'll either go blind or be reduced to dust, and that any bat that receives a middle ban from humans will bring misfortune on the entire colony and die a slow, painful death. However, further in the book, there's an entire cult of bats that not only believe that they were banded because they were chosen to receive Nocturne's promise, but will actually turn into humans. Goth believes in nothing but his own physical superiority to smaller, weaker creatures, which entitles him to eat them, and faith in his own deity, Kamazatz, who is an actual Mayan deity of the underworld who takes the form of a bat. Goth also mocks Nocturna, claiming that she is a weak deity simply by looking at the creatures that worship her. It could just be me, but considering the third book, Firewing, I can't help but know what is trying to say something about religion and belief. One thing I will say is, while it's fine to have belief in a higher power, if you want things to get better, you actually need to try and be the change you want to see happen, no matter how difficult it may be to accomplish, rather than just hope that God's gonna magically fix everything for you. Granted, I could be wrong about this religious subtext, and just talking out my butt, but you tell me what you think, viewers. I did say there was a cartoon adaptation of the book, which was produced by Canadian studio Barrel Entertainment, and debuted in 2003. It sort of stays faithful to the book, but there are also a number of changes that I may cover in another video when I find the time. I have a few issues of the series, mainly pertaining to the art style. This might sound funny coming from a furry, but a lot of the characters are just way too anthropomorphic. I I get that bat wings are just forms that hyper-evolved so bats could fly, but in the cartoon, the bats have actual hands attached to their wings. I have seen avian characters that use their wings or hands a number of times, but something about this is just a little off-putting to me. The bats also have hair. Not entirely against that, but rather than have tufts of hair on their head, the same color as their coats, or maybe even a little highlight to differentiate it from the fur on their bodies, most of the Silverwing characters in Marina have blonde hairstyles, while Goth and Throb have slicked back hair, like they're Colombian drug lords or something. Again, not entirely against the bats having hair. I get that it's meant to be artistic and differentiate the bats from each other, but I can't help but be bothered when I look at the female bat characters like Frida, Ariel, and Marina, and feel their long hair would certainly get caught on limb or something. The adult owls also have facial hair and I don't like it. Lastly, there's the voice acting. I was surprised to recognize a few voices here. Pam Hyatt, Matt Hill, and Richard Ian Cox. Unfortunately, since I was mainly exposed to these people through anime, namely anime adaptations of the works of Rumiko Takahashi, I couldn't help but hear Kaede whenever Frida spoke. I was also surprised that Michael Dobson could do a Spanish accent, but I never really imagined Goth having one when I was reading the book. Would I recommend this book? Yes, it's an enjoyable read with engaging characters. Shade's a likable enough protagonist, full of determination not to give up on his journey, and desires to be seen as anything but a runt. Marina is an enjoyable snarker, but also has some depth to her, and Goth's everything a good villain should be. Don't let the fact that this is a book about talking bats turn you off from giving it a chance. This is Night That I saying, thanks for letting me share my thoughts. Please share yours with me.